Please, I think you're the winner, Andres.
Mhm.
Right. You are the winner of the furthest login of the National Power BI User Group. So
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. Thanks so much for joining that. Great. Love to have the diversity where people are from here. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. Thanks for joining our user group. We'll go ahead and get started. Let me get my slides up and running, and then we will hop into it. All right. Thanks so much for joining, everybody. This is actually May, of course. Well, yeah, we're April, so I did change that. Thank you for joining the April user group of our Excel and Power BI user group. Today, agenda today, we're going to go through announcements, job opportunities, what's new. It's actually going to be Jason, but Michael sent me his PowerPoint. So, of course, I didn't change that last slide, but it's going to be Jason's actually talking about data modeling piece here. All right, so biggest piece, those are local. Thank you so much for everybody who's far away, but those who are local, we are thinking about going back in person. And what we want to do is get a survey results and understand what the best place is, what time, and everything. So scan this QR code, please, and let us know. Fill out the survey. It is a Google Doc. It should have went out on Meetup as well if you haven't gotten it, but I'll wait a couple seconds for y'all to scan this. But we want to understand, one, greatest time frame, where we're at, and just other additional information. So please fill out the survey so we can make a wise decision. But we do want to meet in person where it makes sense. So I'll let this sit here for a second. And as I mentioned, that should be in our meetup documentation as well. We'll also post it in the comments of the meeting. So if you haven't gotten to it now, you will see it, but please fill it out whenever you get the chance. So some of our future meetings next May, we will have Michael Hewitt presenting on demystifying DAX. So if you're unfamiliar with DAX or you feel like you're a DAX expert, quotation marks around experts, or you're all the above, come join. He has some great stuff on DAX. It's going to be a great session, a great topic for that. But to that point, speakers, we are constantly looking for speakers. So we would love to have local speakers, but then we're still virtual. So we would love to have speakers from all over. Content is content. Whatever you think that you want to speak about, let us know. Even if you're scared of being a speaker and you're like, hey man, I really would love to speak, but I don't have a topic. Let us know. We can help you out. Or if you're like, I'm scared of speaking and I need some help, reach out to one of the speakers here as well. We can do a co-speaking thing as well, so where it's not all on you. But we are constantly looking for speakers. So let us know, hit us up in the comments or hit us up on Meetup, send us an email. But if you're interested, definitely let us know. We're constantly looking. So some events that are coming on, we have SQL Saturday this weekend in Atlanta. If you are in the Atlanta area like Jason, it's going to be awesome. This is a great just SQL Saturday. A lot of great content is going to happen. $15 with lunch, but you can go for free if you just want to bring your own lunch or not have it. Or if you have general admission and pre-con as well as 150. A lot of great sessions out there. The website is below SQLSaturday.com, and then look up for the specific area. This one specifically for Atlanta. Then you have Jacksonville, which is April 3rd. I didn't copy and paste the date right, but this one's actually at a later date. But again, go to SQL Saturday for Jacksonville. Those dates are later on, but that is going to the future. And then LSU, Baton Rouge, SQL Saturday, July 26th through the 27th. This is, again, SQL Saturday, Baton Rouge. This is a great one. A lot of great crowd, really good crowd that's out there, and a similar concept. A lot of great content, a lot of good stuff that's going on. A lot of Power BI, a lot of Fabric, so on and so forth. $15 admission, general admission, and this one's still accepting speakers. So if you're interested in actually speaking at LSU, you can submit for this one as well. This was open. I realized this today, so I've submitted. So if you're looking to actually start speaking at SQL Saturdays, go ahead and submit for this one because this one is still looking for speakers. Then we have our great Michael Kinley, who is hosting a dashboard in a day. So I'm gonna leave this up. If you're interested in dashboard in a day, please scan this QR code and it'll give you more information on dashboard in a day. And I think, Michael, you got anything other context you want to provide on this one?
Yeah, well, thank you, Sekou. I appreciate it. Had a lot of great interest so far. There are a few more slots available for this. This is going to be June 1st at the Courtyard Marriott downtown. So it is intended to be in person. So this would be for Nashville folks. Even if this isn't for you, you know somebody who might want to join. Just go to that URL, scan that QR code. We'd love to hear from you. You can also reach out to me directly on Meetup. And love to see you guys there.
Awesome. It's awesome. It's going to be great. I know Michael's fantastic at training, a lot of great content. So sign up, especially if you just want to learn more about creating dashboards and best practices. It's going to be amazing. All right. And then big conference, November 4th through 8th, the Past Community Data Summit in Seattle, Washington. I still don't know if tickets are going on sale yet, but this is one of the greatest conferences. I know they are starting to accept sessions. So if you're interested in speaking, but also if you're interested in attending, a lot of great people are going to come up there and speak, a lot of good connections. People you probably see online, people you probably see on blogs. So it's really just a great session for people to go to and to attend. So with that, I will leave a few minutes for any job opportunities. So if your company is hiring, if you're looking, let us know in the comments that you are expecting or you're looking for some type of opportunity. I'm sharing my screen. Is anybody commenting on anything?
Nope. No, I haven't seen any.
Okay. All right. Well, let us know. Networking, this is the biggest part of the community, is when you're looking for opportunities or you have a role you're trying to fill, definitely let us know. I will post one on here. So there is a business intelligence developer analyst role at Free Market Health. It is 100% remote. This is coming from my former director and manager, and they're trying to fill their team. They're fantastic to work for. You pretty much need SQL experience, healthcare experience, and then a BI tool of your choice, whether it's Power BI or other ones on the market. But if you are looking for this role, reach out to me directly. I can introduce you to them and see if it's a good fit. But I enjoyed working for the two people when I was working for them, and it's a really great fit for someone who's trying to move on. So Free Market Health, BI developer analyst, check it out. It's on LinkedIn, and I think it's actually on the job description on their website as well too. All right, so what's new in Power BI? A lot of great things have happened. You got visual calculations, a lot of good updates are there. If you haven't used visual calculations, they're fantastic. I've actually used them for a use case that I was stuck on recently, so it made my life much easier. Instead of like having to do some crazy DAX, I was able to do some good stuff within the visual itself and really get, I was doing a year-to-date calculation, not year-to-date, but rolling total calculation. And I was able to do that really, really fast using visual calculations. So check them out if you haven't already. On object interaction updates, there's been a lot of feedback from the community that people just don't like some of the stuff when it originally came out. But now they've done a lot of updates. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming out there. Modeling. So I have a picture that I can show about the DAX view on here. That probably close out my Teams windows. There's a lot of cool stuff with the right DAX query with Copilot and expressions and DAX query improvements. A lot of cool stuff with mobile developing visualizations and purview. But for this one, for this particular example, I'm going to show you the DAX query view with Copilot.
Go
ahead.
We're still seeing the slide deck.
Oh, can you see it now?
Nah, still seeing your PowerPoint.
Okay, let me check unless it froze on my end. One sec. What about now? Did it?
I see something embedded in your slide.
Okay.
Is Is that what
What
we're
about now?
supposed to see?
Yep.
Yeah, it's showing now.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, that's
Full
better.
screen. That's good.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, cool. Sorry about technology mishaps, crazy stuff going on. So one of my coolest things, I thought I had a Fabric workspace in my own tenant setup, but I don't because I didn't spend money on it. So sorry, I can't do this in real time. But this is really cool what I saw online, and there's some documentation out there too as well.
Hey Jim, what's going on?
So what you can do is write a question using the new Copilot feature, and you can do the new DAX query view. And basically, you can write a question in here, and it'll write the DAX for you. So basically, this says define a measure for total power sold in the last 7 days. And what it generated was the actual measure, which is a variable. Basically, calculate some, and you have your date table. So it's looking at your data model to do that. And then within there, you can ask another question that says total power sold in the last 7 days by the company. So it's a similar thing here where it actually generated the DAX for you. And then using the query view, you're able to see the actual output as well within query. So it's really cool what Copilot is starting to do and leverage, and how the natural language is starting to work, where you're typing in stuff and it's creating really good DAX for you or DAX for you. So a lot of cool stuff out there. I will also show, I have the slideshow, well, the updates as well on here. So if you go to Microsoft website itself, and you can look and view, all right, everything should be closed out. No more distractions. Sorry about that, guys. So if you actually go into the updates, and one of the updates on here is write DAX and query view, to select it. It gives you more updates on here of how you can do it. So you would type in your information. So this is what it looks like. Again, you have to have the Fabric enabled workspace set up. So if you're not running Fabric, if you're just using Premium per user, this is not going to work. So you do have to have it set up. In fact, I'll actually show you what it look like if you do not have a Fabric thing set up on your environment. So if I go to Power BI, so there's a Copilot preview. Right now, I'm logged into my own personal area. I thought I had Copilot, but just say you want to type it in, right? Here, hit enter. So this will say you don't have access to Copilot. So neither one of your workspaces have the right capacity for Copilot. So again, you have to be on Fabric, but once you're in a Fabric actual capacity or space, or if you're using a trial license that's free for like 60 days, then you can start leveraging Copilot. You definitely want to make sure that you see the preview up here, Copilot preview, but then you also want to make sure that when you go to your options and settings, that Copilot is selected as a preview option. This is another thing as well. This lets you know, like, you either have a workspace or you don't, but once you have a workspace, you can then turn on some of these preview features. So this is what you don't want to see. You actually want to see it. You actually want to have a Copilot workspace, but then when you do have it, then you have the ability to do some of that natural language and looking directly at your model, and then leveraging the DAX query view to show that information. So a lot of great stuff out there. But like I said, if you just want to look at it, go look up the March 2024 Power BI features, and all this stuff is in detail as well. So it shows you all the information, what exactly it's doing. So it's really cool stuff. I think it's a really awesome update. But again, like all things AI is really cool, but make sure you understand what's going on with your DAX. It's going to help you out, but it's not necessarily law or the most performance. So just make sure that you're validating your results and you're looking at it, and it's the best thing for what you need, or you're asking the right prompts for it. So my 2 cents on that. All right. As far as other updates, we had mobile. You have the ability to custom SSL support, fly out desktop developer. A lot of cool custom visualizations are coming out there. And then Purview has some awesome stuff as well. When it comes to Fabric, there's so much stuff going on. Fabric is constantly growing, going super duper fast. A lot of cool things with customizable navigation pane, Git integration. So there's a lot of cool stuff with Git. I definitely am not the best at Git, but it's one thing that I really feel like I need to learn. So I think definitely checking out some of the documentation, some of the information with Git when it comes to Fabric and some of the newness of that is fantastic. Data warehouse is a lot of great stuff. Data engineering, there's some auto tune querying, some Spark Advisor, and then data science. There's new AI samples that came out with Synapse. They're still making improvements there as well. And then Data Factory with Data Flow Gen 2. That's a cool one. And then there's a canceled data flow refresh that just came out, which I think is really awesome because sometimes you might have a data flow or some type of refresh that might get hung or something happen. Now there's the ability to cancel that on there with one update. So definitely check that out. And then data pipelines is out there too. One big thing, if you haven't already, there's a Microsoft Skills Challenge that is available for you to look at. So what that is drum roll, Cloud Challenge. So if you haven't already, Google Microsoft Cloud Skills Challenge, and there is the ability for you to earn a free certificate, and it's over by the 19th. Let me get the right link up. So this is actually what you want to see. So there's a link where it's become a fabric analyst engineer, start to your journey. We'll post this on here. But if you do this, you do the 30-day challenge or the cloud skills challenge here, you will get a 100% exam discount. The challenge ends tomorrow. So sign up for it today. Do the skill challenge, knock it out, crank it out tonight if you have to. You will get a free voucher to be able to take the DP 600, which is the fabric analytics engineer certification for free. So it's great. I highly recommend it. It's a tough exam. It's a good exam, but it's just back to be able to get a 100% discount so you can understand where you're at, pass or fail. It's not really, the matter. It's more about the process of learning about fabric and going through the learning path. But to be able to do that risk-free with 100% discount is worth its weight in gold. So if you can, go ahead, log in, sign up for that, get that free one, test it out. And I promise on the other side of going through the journey from learning where you're at now to preparing for the certification, you'll be a lot smarter and a lot stronger in the fabric and understanding kind of some of the ins and outs. So I highly recommend it. Definitely check it out. Again, last day is tomorrow. So sign up for it, do the practice exam, do all this stuff. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. All right, so what's new in Excel? So right now, Excel for web, there's a new update that allows you to export to CSV. And then from web specifically, you can now create Power BI connected tables in Excel. So before you can do this and using Windows, Excel and Windows, you connect to a Power BI. But now when you're using Excel for web, you can now connect to a Power BI instance too. So again, they're trying to get this whole ecosystem, which is amazing, to connect to one singular semantic model and allow it to connect to multiple tools, whether it's you're pulling Lakehouse or you're pulling a semantic model to Power BI or you're doing some stuff in Excel. This stuff is connecting all in one. So big props to Microsoft for doing some really great things with that update. Excel for Windows, default theme for Office, Excel for Mac. So nothing super huge there, but the biggest one I saw was Excel for web. Power Apps has some great stuff. I'm not going to pretend like I'm even an expert at this, but if you do some stuff in Power Apps, there's a March 2024 update. The biggest piece that I saw was directly called SQL Server Store Procs in Power Apps preview release. So if you're doing some stuff there where you're trying to directly call some store procedures, I think that's really cool. Can be really, really powerful. A lot of cool function updates that are up there, and some unicard characters and just different things with some of the calculations, which I think are amazing. And then if you're using mobile users, you can start an app as a startup app too. And then you have Power App Desktop. So IntelliSense capabilities are now available for Power Calculations now in desktop flows, which is awesome. IntelliSense is amazing. It makes life much easier when you can just tab and you can fill in whatever functions you're trying to do. And then there's an action and clear cells in Excel worksheet has been introduced. So it's really cool action where if you're just trying to clear everything in Excel worksheet or push a button to do that, now it's a new action now in Power Automate, which is really cool and makes your life much easier. So with that, we will pass it to the minute an hour, Jason, to talk about the basics of building a data model in Power BI.
Thank you. Go ahead and get this set up real quick. Can you see my picture on the screen?
Yeah,
And then I am on the, like my face is on the screen too, right?
yeah.
Okay. Because to be honest, I've never actually done this before. All right, so that's all good.
Yeah, all good.
All right, so thank you everyone for joining. The topic is basics of building a data model in Power BI. I'm Jason Romans. I'm a senior business intelligence engineer. I really like the title Builder of Models. I blog some under the blog The Dax Shepard. I like puns, so there's the actor Dax Shepard, and then I also think of shepherds that have helped me learn Dax, learn building models, and then I try to help and shepherd other people to learn too. I live in Nashville, Tennessee with my wife. I started as SQL Server DBA, but I made friends with the FP&A group and learned kind of their needs and what they needed as far as data models and building out things. So I actually did the full stack. So in order to make it work, in order to get to analysis services, I had to do everything from integration services to SQL Server database, putting it in analysis service tabular, and then finally actually getting to work with it in Power BI. And my love is really that analysis services, Power BI, tabular data model on, and then now even with the offerings in Fabric. So I'm trying to dedicate more time to that piece. And since we're talking data models, I have to say my favorite data model that I've created, I named TARDIS because I wanted a very generic name. I was a Doctor Who fan, or am a Doctor Who fan, so I named it TARDIS. Little did I know that there would be company emails, company meeting requests about TARDIS. Tell us about TARDIS. We need access to TARDIS. So it's just kind of funny that this data model name kind of lived on. So our journey today, we'll do an intro. We'll look at Power Query. And yes, that sheep is like levitating off the grass there. I am not the best with graphics and PowerPoint. And then we'll look at the data model itself. And then we'll do a brief kind of introduction to external tools. Part of that is even just to introduce people that there are external tools that can be leveraged. And then we'll have a conclusion. So intro. So I realize if you download Power BI desktop and you start using it, it can be very daunting. And we'll go through some of those things of where immediately you could be like, I don't even know what to do at this point. I just want to make visuals, or I just want to build a model, but there's all these steps that I'm not sure what to do.
Hey, Jason, you're on mute.
Am I off mute now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. That's weird. It's like something muted it. Okay. And then lastly, I want to actually visualize the data. So when you picture your model, this is what you picture. But reality, this is how you start. And this is like, okay, I don't know what to do. But if you bought this model would actually come with instructions. It would actually tell you this is what you do. Unfortunately, there is no step-by-step instructions for what we're going to do. I do want to add this. I was talking to Michael and we were talking about some of the different things that you're not supposed to do, and don't do a calculated column and don't do this. But today is about encouraging you to use Power BI. If you have not started using it, if you use it, but there's been stumbling blocks, it's not to say, hey, here's a bunch of things don't do or else you'll break it. Again, we're trying to encourage people to use it, not to discourage. And you'll learn that, okay, if I'm going to build a big model, it's enterprise level, there's things that I can do to actually make it more efficient. And that's what today's about. It's the same thing with SQL Server, just knowing how SQL Server works and what are the best practices for something that really needs to scale. So recently I attended SQL Bits in England, and on one of our vacation days, we did the Warner Brothers studio tour. And they had this sign about model making. And I thought it was just kind of a funny little sign, because obviously even on vacation days, I was coming off of SQL Bits. What do I want to do in my career? What do I, do I really want to stay with Power BI and the data model? And that's my passion. And I just thought this was a very interesting sign about model making and miniatures for movies. And another thing how I related to this was when you go through that studio tour, you have people that just make costumes, people that just make the models, and each person has their craft. And we see that in Power BI. We see people that just can go to town and spend all day in Power Query. And then you have people that their thing is the model and optimizing the model. And then we have another group that visualizations is where their love is. And so it's the same thing with Power BI, that you can find the part you really like. So again, instructions, like I said, there is no step-by-step. There's many analogies. I kind of think of Lego blocks, because if you buy a set of, a Lego and it's going to build this Death Star, there are instructions step by step. But if you go in the back of the Lego store and just buy bulk Lego blocks, there is no step by step on how to make something. You kind of have to picture it. You have to draw it out. You have to kind of know how you're going to assemble things. And that's what today is about, kind of giving those guidelines, things that you can use as you encounter those situations and say, oh, I'm going to do this now, but I know that in the future, I should do it this other way. So when we start our Power BI journey, I would almost want to start at the data model and say, this is our goal. This is what we're building. The problem is you have to start at Power Query. You can't just get into a already built data model. You have to bring the info in, the data in. So get data. First of all, you have to find out where is the data. It can live in an Excel spreadsheet. It could be in SQL Server. And that goes for all the other offerings. It may be in Snowflake data warehouse. It may be in Databricks. It may just be CSV files. And then what form is the data in? Is it source data you're actually pulling from that transactional system that the files are copied over and it's all in separate tables? Or like a lot of us have done, it's actually already a report that all the data is combined. So like I said, you almost have to picture how the model is going to look. And we'll get into different types and shapes of the model, but you kind of have to have a little bit of picture, and it may just be the one table that you're working on. And then you'll kind of proceed through the instructions step by step in Power Query. And just remember, unlike a toy model, changes can be made. There's no glue. In fact, Power Query has just an excellent UI for making those changes. I'll ask really quick, is it helpful to have the picture in the bottom right, or should I move that out, or does it matter?
I like seeing your face.
Okay. Just wanted to double check. Okay, so when you start out in Power Query, you start out at get data, and then it depends on which data source you're actually going to pull from. And this is where I say it can be daunting because, okay, I pick SQL Server database, but now I'm presented with another question. Do I want to import it or do I want to use direct query? For most cases, we're always going to pick import. Import is going to bring that data and land it into the internal data store, the Vertipack engine that's in Power BI. Direct query has its uses. You can even do a combination, but for most cases, especially when you're starting out, you're going to want to import that data. And then again, you can learn, okay, I need direct query because I need to go against this database where the most up-to-date information is. But even then, maybe I only do it for a week's worth of data and all the rest is imported. So I don't want to kind of get into that complicated scenario right away. Most cases start with import. And then you have to select the tables or views you want if you're in SQL Server. Obviously, if you're a CSV, there are no views. If you have a database administrator, or you're pulling from a data warehouse, most likely you want to choose the views because that way there's that abstraction from the tables themselves. And the database administrator, whoever's maintaining that, can also add logic to those views. And then we get another, okay, I got another choice. Now do I load it or transform? If you load it, it just goes ahead and loads it to the table. Transform is where we're actually going to go into the Power Query editor and do our steps and do our transformations. So once we're in the Power Query editor, because I chose transform, that's where we get to see that we have a set of queries. I brought in these 4 different tables or created queries for these 4 different tables. And then we start building out our steps over here of what we're going to do with those queries. And it is, like I say here, it is like a recipe. You're starting from your very first query step and adding on to it as we go. The nice thing is they can easily be removed. Just hit the check mark or the X and it will go away. You can go and change things. You can reorder them. The other nice thing is it starts from the top down. So you can actually build out steps that get a column exactly how you want it, and then remove those columns that generate that to begin with. So if you're doing a CSV, one of the things you may want to do is promote the headers as the first row. That way you actually go from just column 1 to the column name. And you'll see that step was added here. So if I'm like, well, no, it's not really what I want to do, I can get rid of it. A CSV, maybe I have to remove 5 lines and then promote the headers. So again, I love this UI. I love this in Excel. I've done whole projects where built out just in Excel, go get these 35 files, do all these steps, combine them. And like I said, the UI just makes it easy to work with. And there's lots of choices, and some of it is almost future proofing. Like you have a choice of you can remove these 2 columns, or you have a choice where you can actually say, I want to keep these 3 columns and remove the other columns. And they may seem very similar, but in this case, if you remove other columns, you're basically saying keep these three, and no matter what is added to the source, I don't care, just keep these three, get rid of everything else. And so that way, when all of a sudden that source file changed and they add 10 columns to it, still works. You can filter rows where, okay, I just want to keep the data after a certain date. Another thing it will usually try to do automatically is it will set the data types for you. In Power Query, it may not matter as much if you're just in Power Query or just in Excel, but we're ultimately trying to put this in a data model. So this is the point where we actually can set those data types, because in the Power BI data model, the correct types matter. Basically, you want the same type for relationships. It does impact performance if you pick, I don't want to say the wrong data type, but if you pick a different data type. Because again, I don't want this to be, oh, this is completely right or wrong. It's up to you to kind of look and see, and you can actually test and say, okay, actually, this does make it a lot more inefficient. And again, for calculations, you're going to want to set those data types to what you actually need. If it's currency, then you want to set it to currency. So as an example, I did this where I took the product key that I'm normally going to use to join to from the product table down to the sales table. I went in and set it as a string and loaded it to a data model, used one of the external tools to check and see what the size of that column was. And it's over 1 million there. And then I took it and changed it to a whole number. And you can see, instead of being one of the top table or the top columns, it's now at the very bottom. In that case, most of that space was spent on creating a dictionary for that string to be able to store the string. We won't cover all of this because there is just a lot of detail to how the tabular engine works. But it is going to, as you're pulling in all these columns, it is going to try to compress them down to the smallest that they can be. And so it will use dictionaries, hashes, it will use run length encoding to actually compress those down. And so that's why we're trying to prepare things and do things in Power Query. So once it goes through that compression step, we get the smallest tables possible, which means our measures and our calculations and visuals will run faster. Another thing for that is the cardinality, how many unique values we have in a column. So the less unique values, the better. If all we're storing is true, false, that's almost best case, or 0 and 1, because chances are it's going to have a run of 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and it can compress that down. Whereas if we're storing date and time, and we're including the seconds, the chances of finding values that can be compressed that are the same become almost impossible. And you may do things where it's like, well, the business said we need to look at things by morning, afternoon, and night. We just need to know, did that happen in the morning shift, the afternoon, or the night? Well, then do you really need the date or time? Can you actually do it where you just translate it and say, oh, that happened in the morning, that happened in the afternoon, and that's all you store in that column, and you remove that date and time? Again, that's why this is an art form, because it is about knowing what the business requirements are, determines what your model looks like, determines the Power Query steps you're going to go through. Power Query has neat options where you can add custom columns where, like in this example, if it equals a certain amount or is under a certain amount, then you'll set that to be in a or small medium. Just like we said, it could set it to morning, afternoon, and night. And it makes it really easy to create these columns doing them this way. This one was always, you always saw these in demos because it was kind of like the first thing of AI that I can actually tell it to create me a column from examples. And as I start typing it in, it guesses what I'm going for. Like, oh, you're actually trying to get the year out of this birthday. So that was always a fun thing. I know Copilot's kind of eclipsed this at this point. So Roach's maxim, a lot of us know this and kind of always repeat it. Your data should be transformed as far upstream as possible and as far downstream as necessary. So if you can transform it as close to the source as possible in the SQL server, if not, okay, in Power Query. All right, if not, then actually in the data model, then that is best. So again, if I can push everything to the database, to the Snowflake database, Fabric, that is the best. And actually, let me go back to this just really quick. We'll cover some of the reasons, but one of the reasons is if you can have everything in the SQL Server in your source database, usually it's easier to document, it's easier to say, okay, these are the transformations that are done. Also, those transformations that are done for this, they may be able to use by multiple groups, multiple projects, multiple models. The other thing is, if you're doing it in Power Query, that means every time you run that query, every time you're loading that data, that does have to happen. So there is a time to that. And then if you're doing it actually in Power BI as a calculated column, and we'll get to that, it's after everything has already been optimized. And so you're not going to get the most efficient model out of that. So I have a Power BI file that does not have any data in it. Go ahead and open it up. And then at this point, I do have choices. I do have some CSVs out there that I can pull in. I have a SQL server living on this laptop that I can connect to. I'm going to keep that as import. I'm going to go ahead and look at this SQL server that's running. One thing I like about the SQL interface is that you actually can select multiple objects at once. So I have these views. I'm just going to do product and sales. And then I'm going to click transform data. If I accidentally click load, it would just load it to the data model. And then I can come back and edit that. The nice thing about Power BI, most things are not, I can't get back to that step. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. It's very friendly, I think, in that way. So I don't have to promote the headers because this is a SQL server, so it already had the column names. I can see my source, and most Excel people are all familiar with the formula bar, so I can come up here and see that. I can also see what this code is by going to view in the advanced editor. So that's that code, and it was kind of mentioned earlier on the call that I can take this code and go to Excel and paste it in Power Query there. I can save out to a notepad. These are the steps needed to connect to that SQL database and that table. And as we build out those steps, the code will become a little more complicated. And then here's these steps here where I basically have my source, and then the navigation is going to that table. And it's basically, I'm stepping through time because I connect to the SQL Server. Now I connect to the table. I'm going to go ahead, and all I really care about at this point is I have that product table. So I want the product key. I want quantity, and let's just do unit price. Let's say that's all I need at this point. We're not sure we're using any of this other data. So I'm going to remove the other columns. I want to make sure my item types are correct. So that one already is a whole number. Quantity's fine. Unit price is currency. That looks good to me. And then let's say in product key, all I care about is that product key and product name. I'm going to remove those other columns too. So I've done just a couple of steps on each one, just enough. And remember, I can come back and change this, but this gets me two tables that I can now look at. And I've actually loaded them into that VertiPack tabular data model. These two tables are now not sitting somewhere else. They're in memory, accessible to Power BI reports. And the nice thing about Power BI is when you build really good models and very big models that are a benefit to the enterprise, you can publish those models and then other reports can then connect to them. So we haven't really covered the modeling piece. We've covered the Power Query part, but I do want to go ahead and connect these relationships together. So basically I connected from product key to product key. So now when I select things in product, it will actually filter down to sales. So I have built a data model. I built a very simple one, but this may be all I need to answer the questions that the business has. So continuing on with Power Query, you'll hear something called query folding. You'll be told not to break it. It almost sounds scary because you're breaking something. All query folding is I'm going to do these steps in Power Query. If I'm connected to something that has compute, like SQL Server, Snowflake, Databricks, something that can actually accept a query, do its magic, and return data back. Unlike a CSV, there is no engine. A CSV, I'm going to bring all the data from the CSV in, and then that compute is in Power Query, in Power BI. It has to do all the processing. Whereas if I'm connected to SQL Server can do processing, SQL Server can return me data. So all query folding is I can go through my list of steps in Power Query, and we'll get to this later, but they are going to add an icon here, and I can right click on one of those steps. And if that view native query is not grayed out, it means there's still query folding happening. So if I actually look at that native query, this is the query that it's going to send to SQL Server. So I'm pushing back all that work where I'm going to filter, I may rename columns. Everything I'm doing, I'm pushing that back to that source system, let it do all the compute. So then when it returns it to Power Query has less to do. So as an example of breaking it, if I say only keep the bottom 20 rows, if I'm using SQL Server, current version, it does not have a bottom clause. So the step before that, where I removed columns, query folding works, there's a native query, but as soon as I go to keep bottom 20 rows, it no longer can fold that query back to the source system. But if I change that, where I say keep the top 20 rows, well, SQL Server has a top in clause, so it can do that. So at this point, I have not broken query folding. Again, this is the query that's sent when the model is refreshed. It's not when you're interacting with visuals, when you're looking at things on the matrix. We're talking about when I refresh that data model. Maybe that's once a day, maybe that's every hour. That's what we're talking about. And then the other thing to be aware of is you want to try to do all the steps you can, and you can reorder your steps to where you don't break that query folding to the very end. You know, let it do everything, and then, okay, because when we say breaking query folding, it's still going to fold the query at some point and send it to SQL. And then when it returns it, we're going to do a couple of steps after. Maybe we do just do the bottom 20 at the very end. Just remember, it still works, know what it is, and then try not to break it till later. And I only kind of harp on that because I know the word breaking, query folding, and it's such a thing, like don't break it, don't break. It's just one of those things where it's more about knowing what you're doing and knowing what it even matters and why. So there are a new experience coming to Power BI Desktop Power Query where you'll be able to see the different icons like they have on Power Query Online. I did try to ask what timeline or a date at SQL Bits, and I got a, yeah, you're not going to trick me on that one answer. So it's basically just sometime this year that that's supposed to come to Power BI Desktop. Another thing that's very helpful in Power Query is parameters. You also see this with incremental refreshes, but it's really helpful when you want to say, okay, I'm going to create a parameter for my SQL Server name, my database name, and then you can change that. So if I'm doing a demo and I actually want to change to a different database, it makes it easy. So, you know, Contoso 10,000 rows, if I want to easily change it to 1,000,000 rows, I don't have to go back into Power Query. So I definitely recommend using parameters. They can make your life easier. Obviously, there's cases where you have to use them and to be able to change them in the service later to point to different environments. So again, the goals of Power Query is we really want to try to get the smallest data set possible as early as possible. So if we can get rid of rows and we can get rid of columns, that will help how much memory that model is going to take up. The Power BI tabular model is a column store model. So it stores everything in columns. So we're not as concerned about the number of rows. It does matter. The number of columns matters even more. So if there's 10 columns you do not need, get rid of those early in the Power Query step, especially if you're using a SQL Server, Snowflake, something that you're going to push that query back. Let it return the smallest amount of data. Again, and then unique values. If there's any way that you can set the granularity to just the date, or maybe separate out the date and the time, or only return the hour. Again, it depends on your business case. It's more about, does that data really need to be there, and does it need to be the granularity that it's at? And then again, try to preserve query folding as long as possible. So we've done all those steps. And again, those steps are going to change depending on the data model you're bringing. But you almost need to know what the data model looks like and what you're trying to aim for in order to shape, carve that data and make it look the way you want it to. So first of all, we're going to start with date tables, because date tables are something almost everyone needs. And how they get into Power BI sometimes may surprise you. So one of the options in Power BI is the option to turn off date tables. And you may say, well, there's this feature in Power BI. It's going to create me auto date tables. That sounds like a great thing. That's something I want to leave on. The problem is those date tables are hidden. They create behind the scenes a date table for every single date that Power BI finds in your model. And when we think about that, it's like, that makes sense. Order date, ship date, makes total sense. Oh yeah, but it also did it for birth date. A lot of times you're not slicing by birth date. You may have 10, 12 dates in your model. You now have 12 hidden date tables. It is trying to be helpful. It is doing it because a lot of people, when they do have one date that they want to look at it by a hierarchy. They want that year, month, quarter hierarchy. It's able to build that. The problem is I can't go and customize these. So if we're using a different fiscal year, if I have to have extra columns, I can't add those. So now these tables are taking up memory in my model. So what are some of the alternatives? Well, one option is to actually create it in Power Query using IM. There's a speaker, Christina Ferris. I recently saw her presentation on this, and she has, and I will make all my slides available. In fact, they're on my GitHub right now, so you don't have to write down these links. There will be the slide available. But she built a date table completely in Power Query. The code is here. You can just copy and paste it. What's nice is it's commented. It has a lot of different helper columns. So if you're doing a lot of time intelligence, she has things in here that help you. Oh, okay, I just need to go back 1 year. I want to go forward a year. Because at the end of the day, the date column is just a number. So this is just a partial of that code. The full thing is a lot longer. I'm going to open this up really quick. Now, again, the price we pay is this is done because it's in Power Query, so it's at refresh. So when you refresh the model, however long it takes to do this, that's when it's happening. So this is just, a quick little view of all the columns. And again, a lot of those helper columns for someone who has to do a lot of time intelligence. And then if I want, I can go really quick, like we talked about earlier. I can go look at the actual code that I copied and pasted in here. And like I said, she not only commented it, but each thing is named. And so when you see those steps here, it's easy to tell what each step is. And this also is one of those best practices for Power Query for future you. is to rename the steps. And then even more so if you're handing this off to someone else. Another option, and I'll cover later, is there are other external tools that help you build a date table. Ultimately, the best thing is if you have an environment where someone has created a date table that lives on SQL Server or lives in Databricks or lives somewhere else so that it's maintained there, the whole company can use it. You pull in just the columns you need, or maybe there's special views created. And then that way it's not even done at refresh, it's already done. Something to remember is once you create that date table, you need to mark it in Power BI as a date table. So there's a couple different ways to do this, especially with external tools, with how Power BI has the model view. But if you just go to your table view and you look at your list of tables, you can just right click on it and mark as a date table. What this does is it tells Power BI, hey, this is a special table, it's a date table. So if I start using time intelligence code in my DAX, treat this as a date table. Even though I may tell you only to remove this one filter, I need to remove all the filters on date. So if you don't have this marked, it just will affect some of your time intelligence measures that you may create. Now, there's another option hidden in the Power BI settings for relationships. This one's not really a big deal. It's up to you. There's a couple different options there. Whether or not you want Power BI to try to create those relationships when it's loaded, that really is a personal preference. Definitely after you import data, check your data model, see if it looks the way you expect it. Because there could be 3 relationships coming out of a table, 2 of them being marked as inactive. And if you're just looking at visuals or looking at code, you may not realize that. I like to usually turn this off because I want to create everything myself. So how do I shape my data? And again, this goes back to how do I know what to do in Power Query if I don't know what the final product's going to look like? Some BI products, they work on a big wide table or one big table. Power BI is not that. Remember, there is a set of engines or an engine behind the scenes working a certain way based on how the data is shaped. So the problem with doing one wide table is it's difficult to find the columns you're looking for. And especially a developer, someone who's given this, okay, build some reports off of this. It's not easy with one big wide table. The refresh can take longer. And ultimately, performance is better with the star schema. You can test this. You can do, okay, I'm going to do a big wide table. You can do, I'm going to load it with 1 billion rows. And you can actually see where kind of that breaking point is. And again, on the back end is a set of engines that they are tailoring and performance tuning to work a certain way, and it works best with the star schema. It also can make the DAX more complicated. If you have everything in just one table, your DAX code may not work the way you think it does. So first of all, we're saying star schema a lot. And then there's also Snowflake schema. And then there's Snowflake, the data warehouse, which makes things even more confusing. So when we're talking about Snowflake versus star schema, it goes back to the old ways of data modeling that is not changed in 30 years. And whether you do Snowflake and star schema, and this can be completely separate from any technology. It doesn't have to be in Power BI. You can model data on a piece of paper. So all Snowflake is it's just, instead of being this one dimension table, this one table that has product in it, it's closer to how it looks in the database in the transactional system, where we've separated out the subcategory and we still have another separation of the category. So again, as someone who's building reports, I have to know, oh, this category, first of all, it's just called category, but I have to know it belongs to product. And if I filter category, it filters down to subcategory, which filters down to product, which filters to sales. Not only is it better for Power BI to be in a star schema, I think as far as a developer, as a person using this, I like all these attributes to be in product. I want product to have everything in that table related to a product, a life. We're trying to relate these and model things off of real life. So a product, okay, it has a brand, has a color. Well, it also has a category and a subcategory that we're putting it in. So the one that I ran into a lot is Snowflake for ERP, where you have that general ledger, you'll have a header, and then in there you'll have many detail rows. Instead of keeping those separate, you make that into one table. A dimension example would be employee. You may have subcategory, category. They may be full-time. They may be hourly, salary, so things like that. If we're given that data, we should be looking in our mind to combine that all into employee. So what's a star schema? So here's one I created, and you can see kind of why it's named a star schema by how I arranged it. I do want to point out how we arrange tables has nothing to do with the way they work. This is just kind of the common one that explains what a star schema. I started doing BI and Power BI using Rob Colley's book. So I kind of preferred the Colley method, where I actually put the fact table at the bottom and the dimensions up top, because in my mind, I would visualize those filters flowing down into the fact table. Again, those two models work exactly the same. In fact, a lot of times it won't even save how you've kind of ordered the tables. It's just mentally, it can help you visualize what is happening. So Snowflake is harder to understand as a developer. We won't get into a lot of the details, but with Snowflake, you can run into issues when you start doing DAX. Star schema is simpler and it's better performance overall. Again, there is breaking points because, I mean, even one big table, if you have 10 rows, can be faster because you're not dealing with relationships. But at the end of the day, Power BI and Tabular Engine is designed to run a certain way. So I said with Snowflake, you may run into an issue. And this is where if you, like, for whatever reason, we have to keep it Snowflake, that's what the business wants, or that's what we're told we have to do, then you need to look up the DAX concept of expanded tables. And basically what it means is in DAX, when I write product, in DAX, it really means the expanded table of product, which would mean product, subcategory, and category. That is the fully expanded table. So what that means and what I've written here, it's only those subcategories that have a product. There is no way in DAX for me to reference that base table. Again, star schema don't have a problem with this case because product is product. It's already been all joined together. DAX can be easier with the star schema. If you have your dimension table of product, like we showed, and then we have our sales table, when you do things that iterate through those tables, like max, min, average X, you can say, like I did here for each brand, look at this brand, just this one, filter it down and give me the sales amount, and then go to the next one. And that engine is made to answer questions like this because it's made to take that filter from the dimension and one to many push it down to the sales table. So, I mean, this code is about as simple as you can get for average X, max X. So if I have Snowflake and I don't have a DBA, I don't have someone that can do the work, I have to do all the work in Power Query. I did that in this Power BI file. It's just as simple as joining those tables together. And on one side, I have them left as a snowflake, and on the right side, I have the full product. So again, if you can't push that back to somewhere, if you have to do it yourself, this is easily done in Power Query. It's just happening every time I refresh. Another thing you want to do with your data model is hide your columns that should not be visible. The easiest one is any of your key columns, the ones that you're doing your relationship on. No one should be dragging those out and adding up the product ID. Going further than that, you really should be building measures on top of any column that has values that you're going to do calculations on. Again, that probably goes back to early Rob Colley of, I want to build explicit measures on top of everything I want a user to be using to add up. The nice thing is you're building a measure is almost like a view on top of that value. So if you need to introduce some logic, you would inject it in the measure. You control formatting. Again, those columns that it's based on, you really should hide those. The user should only see your environment that you've created for them, where it's very easy to tell, oh, I got these 5 measures. I should use these 5 measures. Again, an implicit measure versus explicit measure. Implicit is where we're just dragging over the value. We've built no measure on it. So if I take the value and I just drag it over, it will do a sum of that amount, and you can change it. You can do a count and a distinct count. It will do the measure or the calculation it thinks you want. The problem is, again, we're not controlling that experience. What's more, if you start using calculation groups as they currently are implemented, it will not work with implicit measures. It disables implicit measures. In fact, they call it discourage implicit measures will be turned to yes. So if you start using calculation groups, your model cannot have implicit measures anymore. So if you start using them now and get in the habit, then when you introduce calculation groups, everyone's already used to that. Calculated columns, and this goes back to the Roach's maxim, if you can, create them in the source. Don't create them in your DAX model. The reason why, and I point this out, a lot of people say don't create them, but they never tell you why. It's because when you run the Power Query, it brings in the data. The DAX engine then takes that amount of data and it sorts the columns and tries to figure out the optimal way to sort it so that it can compress it as much as possible. calculated columns are not added till after that step. So if you do all that and you have 10 calculated columns, it can no longer find the optimal way to sort the whole data set. And so chances are those calculated columns are going to take up more memory than they may have. Again, it depends though. They may not take up more data. But if you have a data set and you can do little things, or okay, I'm going to try this with and without, and you can see, does it make a difference? Again, if possible, do it in the source. On external tools, I think more than anything, I want you to know they exist, that there are external tools out there that can help you in your journey, that can show you issues with your model, that if you're given an environment and you have to kind of figure out the big things to handle first and tackle, there's external tools that can help, and mostly all of them are free, or at least have a free version. So Tabular Editor is one of the first ones I started with. You can take and write scripts in C# that can automate creating measures on top of everything, hiding columns, things that could take you hours or days, you can do in Tabular Editor a lot quicker. You also can do them against other models. So, okay, I did this one thing here, now I need to do it there. Because I may have 10 models I have to do this exact process on. The other thing it includes is the best practice analyzer. And I have a link to these resources in the slides, but you can actually download a set of rules, or you can create your own that you run against a model, and it will tell you, hey, you're not hiding these columns, you're formatting. All these things, and sometimes it actually allows you to correct it with a script that it provides, or you just may have to correct it on your own. But just being able to audit a model and see best practices is invaluable. So we talked about date tables. Another kind of option is the software or the product Bravo. Bravo to me is almost a kind of a Swiss Army knife. It has a bunch of things in it. One of the things is creating a date table, but like we talked about earlier, it will not work if that auto date time is enabled. So you have to make sure that's turned off in your Power BI file, because it's going to create date tables for you. It has a lot of kind of features to it. Again, there's where we would turn off that auto date time. It has a lot of features, even different calendars, depending on your company, what type, do you use a fiscal? You can pick the interval. It will even create time intelligence measures for you. Between this and the Power Query code, it really just depends on your use case. If nothing else, I love this because I can go through the steps, I can create the date table, and then I can go back and look at that DAX and see how it did things. Again, this would be creating the date table after the data has been loaded. You're almost creating these calculated tables. So again, if I could do it in source, do it in source. If not, Power Query. If not, try out Bravo. Again, some of these things don't have to be the way you do it forever. Another kind of neat thing of Bravo, it has things to help you optimize your model. It will show you the size of your columns, the cardinality, everything else, and it's a very easy way to get started. You can even save out, it's called a VPAX file. You can save that out, and then you can pick that up in, I'm blanking out on the tool, but basically the one that's in Excel that analyzes those VPAX files. So this can get you started, and then you're like, okay, I actually want to see this in more detail, so I may use this other tool. I'm actually going to go look at that name really quick. So also, I talked about all these external tools. When you install them and you do a full install, not using a portable version, it actually adds it in Power BI to your list of things. And the nice thing is, if I click on one of these right now, not only will it open the tool, it will make a connection to this currently running data model. So I don't have to try to figure out how to connect to it. So if we've gotten to this point and we've done all we can in Power Query, we've done all we've done in our model, creating the visual should be easier because we should have less columns. We should have just the measures we need. Also, performance. If we build kind of the smallest model we can, when you actually go to build those visuals, they should be more performant, that you're not waiting a minute for it to return the answer. These are kind of the model goals. Again, this is from the Warner Brothers studio. I honestly am not the person who just loves the visuals and creating the visuals. I love the building the model, getting the data, looking at the data and how it's going to be, and then hoping that what I've done has made someone's job easier. So again, if we can shape that data as close to the source as possible, put it into a star schema, and then we can start using those external tools to look at your model and look where you actually can make changes. Like I said, I have a list of resources here, the links that go to the different things we talked about, the different tools. Also, Christina and her dad blog on Data on Wheels, so that's a great blog site to read what she posts. And she also does recaps of the different SQL Saturdays she goes to. And it really depends where you go from here, because if you do go more into, I really want to optimize the model, then you're going to be looking at Tabular Editor, DAX Studio, Vertipack Analyzer was the one I was trying to think of. You're going to look at those tools more. Like I said, on my blog site, I do have, so this is my blog. I do have this GitHub link here that goes to the couple of presentations I've put up here. So you can see the one for today. Also, my contact info is not only on that last slide, on the blog, LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. If you have any questions, if there's something I missed, something you know, or you encounter a problem, you're like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, feel free to reach out to me. And if not, that's all I got.
Great stuff, Jason. Thank you. I did have a couple questions in the chat. Can
Okay.
I throw them out at you?
Yep.
All right. Donnie asked, when you work on data model, do you start with the end goal or the end result and then work backwards?
See, I'll use the it depends. Because on the last one, I knew what they had kind of needed for the previous project because it was a, changing ERPs. And so obviously I had to go into the new ERP NetSuite, and I knew, okay, I at least need the GL and I need this. But in a way, I already had the requirements because I knew they would need revenue. I knew they needed billing info. I knew they needed this certain things. And it also depends if you're trying to build more of an enterprise model, one that can answer many, many questions, that hundreds of reports are going to be built out. You're going to keep more data and bring in more data. Again, hopefully only certain columns. So I guess the answer is it does depend, but you have to know what the business wants. You have to know what the goal is. Like if we're looking at, metrics for vessels at the port, I at least need to know, okay, what do you need? What do you want to see? Is it just the vessels? Is it the labor? So you do have to start with the business requirements, which then leads you back to where's the source data and then building the model. And then that model, obviously, the development of it is going to change.
Very good. Vikram asked about when you were talking about not writing DAX calculated columns, but pushing that back to the source. So you're pulling that in either in your query from the database or adding a column in Power Query. It's also possible that you can transform data using DAX filters, etc. Could you tell if doing the transformation is better in the data model or doing it in DAX? Maybe expand on that a little more.
Now, if I understand the question correctly, it's almost like if you're going to do a calculation, like you're going to sum up, quantity times net price. Do you do that as a calculated column or do you do that just as a measure?
Right.
If that's the question, then that one, it really does depend. And you can do that example because if you're dealing with a small amount of data, millions of rows, chances are the DAX is going to be faster and you're not going to be storing it in the model because that extra column takes up memory in the model and it's not optimal because it wasn't sorted. But if you're talking, okay, now we're in billions of rows, and if I do that and I add this calculated column and we go and run some of the performance tools and see, then at that point, that column may be worth it. And if it's, not only does that measure use it, but these 10 other measures use it, it is worth paying that price of having that column in there. And that's where, it really, I hate to say it, it gets into you have to test it at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Good answer.
It's almost it's really quick. It almost reminds me of in SQL Server. Do you index this query or don't you? And it's like, well, it depends. And if I put this on it, it speeds it up this much. Oh, and look at all the other benefits versus, no, I did this index. Now it takes this longer to build it. And it only had this one edge case.
Right. Last question comes from the chat from Vikram. Saying, yeah, it looks like the star schema has good advantages. When would you want to use a snowflake, though? Snowflake schema.
Honestly, I wouldn't want to. There is those two methodologies, but in Power BI, if we're using Power BI in the VertiPack, I wouldn't want to. Because one, just like with the ledger, I had to go through that. Do I keep it as a header and then the detail? One, it makes it harder for everyone that has to build reports. And then two, it's not going to be as efficient ultimately. So I really wouldn't want to.
Very good. That covers all the questions we had in the chat. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat as well, or you can unmute yourself and ask Jason directly. Any other questions?
This was really great. Thank you very much, Jason.
Oh, you're welcome. And I will admit there is a lot to this. Like I said, even just some of the slides and getting rid of and deleting ones, because it just, each piece you can almost spend a whole hour easily on just one little part.
Yes. All right, anybody else?
I just want to watch people walk by Michael behind him. That's such a
Yeah.
cool visual.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's a nice office. I've got quite the view right out there, if only the windows weren't frosted.
And I'm very jealous of your Power BI meeting or group that you had.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't doing this session. I appreciate Michael and Sekou taking point on this one. It's nice not to have to do two in one day.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jason, for a great presentation. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you all for coming by today and joining with us. Reminder that our next meeting is scheduled, taking a look at DAX. And that meeting, again, will be on Thursday, May 16th. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to fill out our survey about our meeting locations. We've got links to that on our meetup page, or you can reach out to myself, Michael McKinley, or Sekou Tyler, and we'll be happy to get you pointed to that. We really do want to get back in person and be able to get this community built back up and have awesome opportunities for you guys to connect, share ideas with each other, share knowledge with each other, network, and get all the benefits that being a part of a user group is. So thank you again, Jason. Great stuff. Everybody have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great day.